Welcome back to the Proving Grounds. I'm your host, Andrew, and if you like my last series about the 7 virtues of modern warrior, then you're going to love the next series devoted to the application of violence. As a citizen in a modern, civilized country, we have the illusion of safety not found on most of the planet. And remember, I said the illusion of safety. Because there is and always will be a brutish element in society willing to use violence to get their way. Whether this is to rob you of your goods, or simply to end an argument someone's already lost on an intellectual level. Or maybe it's just some drunk guy that thinks you're someone else at the bar. Sometimes shit just happens. And that is why those of you who have or wish to develop a warrior mindset need to know how and when to apply violence within the proper context of a given situation. I'm going to cover the 5 types of training that will forge a man into a versatile fighter, ready to intelligently defend himself and his family in any situation. So, what is violence? Violence is the use of physical force with the intent to harm or injure or destroy. Another definition is an intense or furious or destructive action or force. I like using those 2 definitions together because violence is furious and intense, and it often can end just as quickly as it began. Okay, it's like a maelstrom of fists and feet, and often leaves broken bones, torn flesh, and blood in its wake. Often for the victor as much as the victim. So what do we do about violence? The first thing we do is we leave our egos at home. And outside of going out and getting proper martial arts instruction, we can develop an acute environmental or situational awareness. This means paying attention to your surroundings and recognizing when something is wrong. Maybe just a little bit off. Find potential danger and then use sound, prudent judgment. Listen to your instincts, follow common sense. And part of this is being strategic in what you do. For instance, when I go out to a restaurant, I'll ask to have a table or booth where I can sit with my back to a wall while I eat. But I also try to make sure I have a clear view as possible of the exits. This way, if trouble comes, I can 1, see trouble's coming, and then 2, I have a few seconds to come up with something to do. That might be simply, diving on top of one of your kids, someone starts shooting up the place. Or grabbing your wife, heading out the back door. Because sometimes that's all you can do is just beat feet. And that brings us to avoidance. This means using your situational awareness to determine what the potential dangers are, and then being wise enough to simply avoid it if possible. Again, if something seems wrong, it probably is. Okay, you're walking down the street, you're in an unfamiliar area, and you're like, oh, hey, there's the dark tunnel. You're going to head down that dark tunnel? No, of course not. Because what is that? That's a choke point. It's a place you can be ambushed. You're already in unfamiliar territory. Why take the chance? Now, if you go the long way around and nothing happens, or there was never anything there, what's the harm in it? You walked extra little bit, you got a little bit of exercise. But really nothing bad's going to happen from that, right? On the other hand, if you ignore your instincts and let your ego create this fantasy that you can overcome armed thugs, especially if you're not armed, with your wife and kids in tow, then you're only asking for trouble. And even if you come out of that, you're not coming out of it unscathed. And then you just drug innocent people with you for what? Your ego. And then, not to mention, if you win any fight that ensues, you can be seriously injured or harmed. You're going to be talking to the police afterwards. You're going to be explaining why you dragged your kids into a potentially dangerous situation, which could have been avoided just by walking around the block. Remember, outside of the cage or the ring and off the mat, winning is often simply surviving. And I would argue avoiding confrontation altogether is the ultimate success. But what happens if the worst happens and you have to use physical violence against another human being? Well, that brings me to the use of force continuum. Now, as a citizen of your state or local municipality, it's incumbent upon you to know the laws regarding this. You have to know what level of force you can use in what situation. And there are plenty of use of force continuum charts that give you a general idea, serve as a guideline for what you can do. And the first level is always going to be using your words, verbal judo, if you will. Okay? And there's when no violence is being used yet. Someone is trying to enter into a verbal altercation with you. Try to use non-threatening body language and try to diffuse the situation if you can. But this is where I also set myself up. I'll raise my hands in a placating gesture. Hey, man, I don't want any trouble. And I'll blade myself. There, I'm already ready. If he gets violent, my hands are already up. I can defend myself, or at the very least, block incoming blows. The next is, things get ramped up a little bit. Start to get a little bit physical, but you don't really fear imminent physical injury. There's no threat of death. Well, here, chemical agents and body holds can be used. Now, remember, there's two things that go with using chemical agents. One, you have to make sure you have the right type available for you as a civilian with the right percentage of OC in it. And many states and municipalities require you to offer some kind of decontamination to a person you just people seasoned. Okay, and that means having a little bit of water available, offer it to them. Grab some water from someone, be like, hey, can I have this? And be like, hey, man, do you want me to help you decontaminate? Do you want some water? Typically, someone you just pepper sprayed is going to be like, leave me alone, get the hell away from me. Then you can say, hey, I offered. Then you have what's called less lethal force, where the guy decides, I'm going to start throwing punches at this clown. Then you can utilize strikes and takedowns to neutralize your enemy. Remember, if you do use a takedown, though, most places, once the guy hits the ground, if you deliver more than one strike, you're going to have to start explaining yourself, okay? Because in a lot of places, once your opponent hits the ground, fight's considered done until they get back up. So again, just know what the rules of engagement are, know what your state says regarding size differences and stuff. Because if you're a 6'4", 280-pound behemoth fighting a guy who's 5'6", 130 pounds, you're gonna have a lot of explaining to do if there are pieces of him all over the ground. Now we jump to lethal force. Right? That means you are in total pucker factor. Your butthole is tight. You think you're about to die. Someone's pulled out a weapon, or you're on the ground and they're smashing your head off the ground. You think you could die from the situation. That's when you can strike another person with a weapon, even to the back of the head. You can stab them. You can shoot them. You can choke the life out of them because you're in a fight for your life in the situation. And remember, this is just a general guideline, okay, for legally resolving conflicts. That doesn't mean some guy pulls out a gun, you're going to be like, hey, man, please don't shoot me. No, screw that. That guy pulls out a gun. If you have a gun, get cracking. You have to do what you have to do to survive at the end of the day. Okay? But after a violent situation, you really need to sit down for a minute, take some calming breaths, and think about what happened and what you can actually recall doing. This is important for two reasons. The first of which is law enforcement officers will be looking for a statement, especially if rounds were put downrange or a weapon of any kind was used at all. Okay, so you're going to need to be able to articulate what happened and why you responded the way you did. The second reason is people often have a hard time recalling what just happened because of the adrenal response. It's caused by your body's fight or flight mechanism. People often have blank spots at first. Gee, what did I do? I remember doing something. And it takes a minute to go back and work through everything that happened. And that's okay. Because while you're doing that, you have to make sure that you calm down. And this is vital so that you can give an honest and coherent account of what happened. If you give a disjointed statement, raving like a lunatic, you may be seen as a less credible witness, right? Especially if you rendered someone unconscious or dealt them some severe, serious physical injury. You have some guy laying around the ground screaming because you just shattered his kneecap, or you stabbed some guy and he's on his way to the hospital. They don't want to see you raving like a lunatic because they're going to be like, this guy's out of control. Now, I'm not telling you to be afraid of the police. If you didn't do anything wrong, most of the time, you're not going to have an issue. They're just doing your job. What I'm saying is the guy showing up to investigate the situation is probably not going to know you from Adam. Okay, so when you're rolling around, screaming hysterically, acting like a jackass, telling the story that you have to go back and correct yourself. No, I don't think I really did this. I did that. Well, no, I got to go back to the beginning. Oh man, did that happen? Gee whiz. Now you're less credible. They're not sure if you're making things up or if you're just confused. I would much rather have myself under control, remaining calm, and telling as smooth and accurate a version of events as humanly possible, considering what just happened. Part of that is training. When you train in a diligent, intelligent manner, and you're used to having some sort of adrenal response to physical confrontation, it is a little bit easier to calm yourself down. Learn a few meditation techniques too. There's something to be said for being able to take a few minutes, calm yourself down, slow those racing thoughts, just get yourself under control. That being said, as far as training goes, I'm a staunch advocate of proper training. If you train, again, intelligently and disciplined with a good instructor, okay, you're going to greatly improve the likelihood you survive a truly violent encounter. Okay, and this series is going to cover 5 main avenues of fighting. We're going to do striking, grappling with MMA involved, edged weapons, combatives, and firearms. Okay, those are all very important areas of training, and it's imperative that you get as much quality training as possible. Now, not everyone's going to be able to go train 6 different martial arts at once, and that's probably not even the best course of action anyway. It's good to get a strong base in something and then branch off from there. If you're more, and that's going to depend largely on your personal passion, aptitude, and availability of what's going on around you. Learn a solid fighting form and branch out from there. The good news is many schools are going to have multiple programs, and they often know instructors in various aspects of the self-defense sphere. So your grappling coach is probably also going to have an MMA program, people who do various kinds of striking. They're going to know people in your local area or be able to branch you out to people who do boxing and Muay Thai if they don't have those programs. Often they're going to know people who do combatives, who have firearms training, things like that. Okay, so you will be able to figure that out as you go along. But again, it's important that you do the training, you be diligent, be consistent with it, develop a strong base, and then you maintain that base. The next episode in the series is going to be on those various forms of fighting. And remember, actually, it's going to be on striking. And I know there are a million places that do striking arts, and there are a million schools. So I'm going to narrow it down to a few types. As a caveat, I'm not claiming to be a martial arts master or a self-defense guru. These opinions are going to be based on my own personal experience. And as with anything, don't simply take my word for it. Do some research and find out. Find a place to train accordingly to what you think will work best for you. So that concludes this episode of The Proving Grounds. Feel free to give me the good, the bad, the ugly, or any topics you'd like to see me cover in future episodes in the comments below. If you like this episode, please like, share, and subscribe and all that nonsense. All right, have a good night.